Daniel Hale had always trusted his family, believed in loyalty above all else. But nothing could have prepared him for the message that blinked on his phone while he waited at the airport gate. Suitcase at his feet. Change the locks. We need to talk. He frowned. Something was wrong. The message was from a neighbor, a stranger in his mind, someone he barely knew. Why would they contact him about his house? And then he saw the sender's name, Marcus, his brother, the one who had always found ways to disrupt Daniel's life, yet somehow made it seem like it wasn't his fault. Daniel swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. He tapped the phone to call Marcus, keeping his voice calm, though a strange chill was crawling over him. "Why are the locks changed?" he asked when Marcus picked up. There was a short pause. Then Marcus laughed, a sound that twisted Daniel's stomach. "'Cause it's mine now? You're never home anyway." Daniel's heart dropped. "Mine?" he repeated, thinking he had misheard. "That house is in my name. I bought it, I pay for it. How can you, Marcus, cut him off?" "Paper doesn't matter. Daniel, I've been living here, paying bills, taking care of the place. That makes it mine." The line went dead. Before Daniel could respond, his hands tightened around the phone. He stood frozen, listening to the hum of announcements over the airport speakers. His flight had been delayed, but he didn't notice. Stared out the window at the gray sky, trying to make sense of the betrayal. It had started innocently enough. Marcus had lost his job months ago, and his marriage had collapsed in a spectacular fashion. Daniel had offered him a place to stay, telling himself it was temporary, maybe 3 months at most. He had trusted that Marcus would leave once he got back on his feet. Daniel had wanted to help. He had wanted to be the kind of brother who didn't judge who opened doors when no one else would. But Marcus had a way of twisting kindness into entitlement. He had never asked, he had taken, borrowed money and never returned it. Spoke as though his failures were everyone else's responsibility. And now he had crossed a line Daniel hadn't thought existed. Claiming the $500,000 house Daniel had worked 10 years to afford. Daniel tried to shake off the anger. He reminded himself that this wasn't physical violence. It wasn't irreparable. He could call the police. He could take legal action. Yet the words Marcus had said burned in his mind. Paper doesn't matter. I've been living here, paying bills. That makes it mine. They were more than a threat. They were a challenge. A statement meant to unnerve him. He thought about all the memories packed into that house. The late nights decorating the living room. The small victories of buying furniture that made it feel like a home. Quiet mornings when he sipped coffee by the window, watching the sun climb over the city. All of it had been taken from him, not by a stranger, but by his own brother. Daniel's flight was finally called. He sat in the plane, staring at the clouds below, trying to imagine how Marcus could justify his actions. Could Marcus really believe he had a right to something he hadn't earned? Could he see Daniel's confusion and pain and feel nothing at all? By the time the plane touched down, Daniel had made a decision. He would confront Marcus, but not recklessly. Anger could cloud judgment, and Daniel wanted this resolved with precision. He would protect what was his. He would reclaim his house. He would make Marcus see that boundaries existed, even for family. When Daniel drove up to his neighborhood, his stomach churned. He saw the truck parked in the driveway, a loud black vehicle that had no place in front of his home. The patio had been rearranged, new furniture that looked cheap and flashy compared to his sleek, minimal setup. Through the front window, he saw artwork that didn't belong, bright colors, chaotic shapes. Marquesa had already invaded every corner, leaving. His mark. Daniel tried the front door. His key didn't work. His heart sank further. He knocked firmly. Marcus opened the door, looking irritated. He was wearing Daniel's robe, lounging as though the house belonged to him entirely. "What are you doing here?" Marcus asked, his voice sharp. "You need to leave," Daniel said, keeping calm, though his hands were trembling. Marcus smirked. "I can't. I have tenant rights." Daniel laughed bitterly, a short sound. Tenant rights? It sounded absurd. He had given Marcus shelter, trusted him as a brother, and now he was being challenged legally in his own home. Daniel's anger simmered. Quiet but intense. A slow burn of betrayal. That night, Daniel stayed in a hotel across the street. He stared at the ceiling, replaying everything Marcus had done over the years. Every favor unreturned. Every lie told. Every time Daniel had let Marcus take advantage without protest. The pattern was clear. Marcus had always been opportunistic, and now he had taken the ultimate opportunity. Daniel's home. Daniel didn't want revenge in a violent sense. He wanted justice. He wanted Marcus to understand consequences. He imagined various ways to confront him publicly, to humiliate him, to make him feel what it was like to be powerless. And yet every scenario left Daniel feeling hollow. He didn't want to lose himself in anger. Instead, he began to plan carefully. He gathered documents, property deeds, mortgage records, utility bills, messages proving Marcus had no legal claim. Everything was organized, precise, undeniable. He would not act recklessly. He would win, not through rage, but through truth. He drafted 2 emails. The first was to a real estate attorney, explaining the situation and requesting immediate advice. The second was to Marcus himself. The words were firm but restrained. "You are occupying my property without legal right. You have 24 hours to vacate." Marcus responded predictably with accusations and outrage. Daniel read the words twice, then archived them. There was no emotion left in him now, only focus. As Daniel finally closed his laptop that night, he realized something. This wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about reclaiming his life, his home, and his dignity. Marcus had challenged him, and Daniel intended to respond not with violence, but with justice. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, Daniel slept. Not peacefully, but with a sense of purpose. He knew the next day would bring confrontation. He knew Marcus would resist. He knew there would be tension, arguments, perhaps humiliation. But Daniel felt ready. The betrayal had been sharp, sudden, and deeply personal. But Daniel had learned something essential. Trust could be broken, family could hurt, and even homes could be taken. Yet the measure of a person was not in how badly they were hurt. It was in how they responded. And Daniel Hale was about to respond in a way that Marcus would never forget. Daniel arrived at his house early the next morning. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the confrontation. He parked a block away, taking a deep breath before approaching the driveway. Marcus's truck was still there. The patio furniture, the garish decorations, the loud chaos of Marcus's style all screamed intrusion. Daniel's chest tightened, but he forced himself to stay calm. Anger was a tool, not a weapon he needed to throw recklessly. He tried the door again, locked, the same as yesterday. He knocked firmly, waiting. Marcus opened the door, wearing Daniel's robe again, this time looking slightly smug, as though he had already won. "Daniel," Marcus said with a half smile. "What a surprise. Come to see your old place." Daniel didn't smile. "You need to leave," he said, steady and quiet. Marcus laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "You think you can kick me out? I've been living here, paying bills, taking care of it. You're just jealous I got here first." Daniel's hands tightened at his sides, but he held himself upright. He could feel the heat of frustration rising, but he didn't let it show. He had learned over years of dealing with Marcus that losing control would only give him an advantage. Instead, he studied Marcus, watching for cracks, waiting for mistakes. Marcus continued, pacing inside the house. "I've done more for this house in a week than you have in years. You're always gone, always busy. You don't even care about it. And now you come back acting like a hero." Daniel felt a mix of fury and disbelief. How could someone so shameless live in the reality of their own lies and still speak with such conviction? And yet, he knew that Marcus's confidence was a mask. Behind it lay insecurity, fear of being irrelevant, of being ignored, of being powerless. That's what Daniel had learned to read over the years. And that knowledge gave him power. He stepped back from the door. Marcus, this isn't about who takes care of what. This is about the law. You have no right to stay here. You've overstayed, and it's time to go. Marcus scoffed. Law, you think paper rules over family? You're heartless, Daniel. Cold, you think you're better than me just because you work hard and have a house. That's not love. That's selfishness. Daniel said nothing. Words from Marcus were cheap ammunition. They had always been. Action, not words, would decide the outcome. That evening, Daniel didn't go home. He checked into a small hotel nearby, sitting in the dim light with documents spread across the table. Property deeds, mortgage papers, previous messages from Marcus admitting he had no claim. Photographs of the house before Marcus moved in. Even utility bills in Daniel's name. Everything was organized, precise, undeniable. He needed proof, not emotion. This was his chance to reclaim not just his property, but his dignity. Daniel drafted 2 emails. One was professional, addressed to a real estate attorney, explaining the situation, requesting immediate advice, asking for legal options. The second was short, direct, and cold. Sent to Marcus, you are occupying my property without legal right. You have 24 hours to vacate. He knew Marcus would respond with outrage. That was predictable. Daniel was prepared. The emails were calm, devoid of anger, but firm. They carried authority. They carried consequence. True revenge, Daniel realized, wasn't loud. It wasn't public. It wasn't satisfying in a way that gave the world a show. True revenge was precise. It was about reclaiming what was yours and exposing the truth without giving the other person any excuse. As Daniel sat in the hotel room, he reflected on the past. Marcus had always been like this, opportunistic, self-centered, charming to others, but manipulative behind closed doors. Daniel had ignored it, protected him, loaned him money, covered for him in family disputes. And each time, Marcus grew bolder. He had crossed lines, blurred boundaries. And now he had crossed the ultimate one, Daniel's home. The hours passed slowly. Daniel didn't sleep much. He went over every detail, imagining scenarios. Marcus arguing with the police. Marcus denying everything. Marcus refusing to leave. Daniel imagined confrontation after confrontation. He imagined feeling rage bubble inside him, needing to strike back physically, verbally, emotionally. But then he pushed those thoughts away. That wasn't him. That would make him no better than Marcus. Instead, Daniel focused on strategy.com. Methodical, unshakable. He pictured the police arriving, reading the documents, confirming the truth. He pictured Marcus packing, leaving, his arrogance fading into disbelief. Daniel imagined standing in the living room alone, reclaiming it not with fury, but with quiet certainty. Yet even in that moment, a shadow of doubt lingered. He didn't want to feel satisfaction at another's humiliation. He wanted to feel justice, closure, restoration. The difference was subtle but essential. Marcus had taken what was Daniel's, and it needed to be returned. But Daniel refused to let bitterness define him. He had learned over the years that rage could be intoxicating, seductive even. But it never healed anything. In the small hours of the morning, Daniel prepared one last time. He reviewed the emails, reread every legal document, and made notes on what to say if Marcus resisted. He considered his own morality, his desire for vengeance, and realized the two could coexist only if he kept control. Anger could fuel action, but precision had to guide it. By sunrise, Daniel felt ready. He returned to his house, keeping a careful distance at first, observing. Marcus's truck was still there, the door slightly ajar. He could see Marcus moving around inside, adjusting things. Acting like a king in a kingdom that wasn't his. Daniel's phone buzzed. Marcus had replied to the email. Predictably, it was a long paragraph of accusations, self-pity, and denial. He called Daniel cold, calculated, heartless, accusing him of overreacting and betraying family. Daniel read it once, then archived it. It didn't matter. Nothing Marcus said could change the facts. Nothing could rewrite the truth. Daniel waited for the police to arrive, heart steady, hands relaxed. He'd planned every step. He had prepared for confrontation without letting emotion take over. He had chosen justice over anger, even if the line between the two felt razor thin. Hours passed. Marcus grew restless. He stepped outside, glaring at the street. Daniel stayed across the road, silent, watching, letting Marcus fume without interference. The tension was thick, almost tangible. The neighborhood, the house. The very air seemed charged with expectation. When the police finally arrived, Daniel felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. This was the moment. Months of betrayal, frustration, and planning had led here. Marcus would resist, argue, maybe even try to manipulate his way out. But Daniel had prepared for everything. He would stand firm, calm, unyielding, and when Marcus was finally confronted by the officers, his confidence would falter. When the law sided with Daniel, he would feel the full weight of the consequences he had so recklessly ignored. Daniel knew this. He had planned it carefully, measured each step. This was not just about reclaiming property. This was about reclaiming himself. For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt a flicker of peace. Not because Marcus had suffered yet, but because Daniel had acted with integrity. He hadn't lashed out. He hadn't stooped to manipulation. He had chosen precision. Justice would take care of the rest. And as Daniel watched Marcus pacing and arguing with the officers, he felt a sense of clarity settle in. Revenge was not about satisfaction, he realized. It was about restoring balance. And in that moment, he understood that the hardest part of reclaiming something lost wasn't the confrontation itself, was maintaining control of your own heart. Keeping anger in check while still standing your ground. Daniel had chosen the right path. He would not be consumed by rage, would not allow betrayal to define him. And when this was over, he would reclaim his home, his life, and perhaps even his faith in what it meant to protect oneself without losing humanity. The next morning, Daniel drove slowly down the quiet street, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The house sat there, massive and silent, a monument to everything that had been stolen from him. Marcus's truck was still in the driveway, but there was something different about the air. Tension, anticipation, the calm before the storm. Daniel parked across the street, taking a deep breath. Today this would end. He watched Marcus through the large front windows. His brother was moving boxes, arranging items, acting as though he owned the place. There was arrogance in his movements, the kind that comes from believing consequences can't touch you. Daniel clenched his jaw. He knew that confidence would crumble once reality intervened. The sound of sirens was distant at first, almost imperceptible. Daniel's heart quickened, not with fear, but with focus. He had done everything carefully: mails, legal notices, documentation, evidence. The authorities were coming to back up the truth. There would be no shouting, no bargaining, only facts. Marcus heard the sirens too. He stepped outside, hand shielding his eyes from the morning sun, scanning the street. His confident posture faltered slightly as the police cars pulled up. Officers stepped out, badges glinting, radios crackling. The presence of law was immediate, undeniable. And it shifted the power in an instant. Marcus approached them, voice raised, hands gesturing wildly. "This is my house." He's lying. You can't do this to me. Daniel watched from across the street, armscrossed.com. He didn't need to intervene. He'd prepared for this. His evidence, the emails, the documents, everything he had collected, would speak louder than any argument Marcus could throw. The officers spoke to Marcus in measured tones. They asked questions, reviewed the documents. Marcus waved his hands, tried to explain, but his words faltered under the weight of the truth. Each paper presented chipped away at the facade he had built so carefully. Daniel could see it in his eyes, the confusion, the disbelief. The first flickers of fear. Marcus had always believed that charm and manipulation could carry him through anything. He had always convinced others to see the world his way, to take his side, to excuse his behavior. But here, confronted with undeniable truth and legal authority, those skills failed him completely. He was exposed, vulnerable, human. The officers motioned for Marcus to pack a bag. Daniel's heart beat steadily. This was it. The confrontation he had imagined countless times, the moment he had prepared for it meticulously. And yet, even now, seeing Marcus's expression, part anger, part disbelief, part hurt, something stirred in him. Not compassion, but clarity. Marcus paused, looking at Daniel across the street. "How could you do this?" he shouted. "I'm your brother. Family matters more than anything." Daniel stepped forward slightly, voice calm. "You did this first. You crossed every boundary. I gave you a chance and you refused to respect it. This isn't about it's about responsibility." Marcus's jaw tightened. He tried to argue further, but the officers intervened, guiding him toward his belongings. He resisted briefly, struggling against the reality of the law, but there was no escape. Daniel's careful planning had ensured that there would be no loopholes, no delays, no excuses. Marcus was escorted out of the house, each step stripping away the false authority he had claimed. He carried a small duffel bag, eyes darting too. Daniel, as if searching for understanding, forgiveness, or maybe revenge. Daniel held his gaze, unflinching. For a moment, as Marcus disappeared down the street, Daniel felt a strange emptiness. Not satisfaction, not triumph, but something quieter, relief edged with a sharp pang of sadness. The house was his again, but the victory was not the kind that fills a person with joy. It was a victory of integrity, of boundaries defended, of justice served without losing oneself. Daniel walked slowly to the front door, keys in hand. He unlocked it, stepped inside, and let the silence wash over him. The house felt different without Marcus, but familiar in ways that mattered. The weight of intrusion had lifted. He ran his fingers along the furniture, touched the surfaces that he had carefully chosen and nurtured over the years. This was his space again, his life restored, but at a cost. He moved from room to room, remembering the times Marcus had laughed at his kindness, taken advantage of his patience, tested his limits. Each memory was a reminder of why he had acted, why he had drawn the line. And yet he felt a subtle grief, not for losing the fight, but for the brother he had hoped could be better. Days passed, and life slowly returned to routine. The house was quiet again, orderly, peaceful. Daniel began to feel the weight of what had happened. Marcus had been removed, justice had been served, but the emotional toll lingered. There was relief, yes, but also reflection. How far should one go in the pursuit of justice? How much anger is too much? And how much restraint is truly heroic? Daniel understood that revenge, if fueled by anger alone, could never bring satisfaction. It could destroy as easily as it could protect. But measured action, grounded in truth, could restore balance without causing unnecessary harm. He had chosen that path. He had protected himself and reclaimed what was rightfully his. And that mattered more than any fleeting sense of triumph. Over Marcus. Late one evening, Daniel found himself drafting an email to Marcus. Not accusing, not threatening, but setting boundaries, offering a chance for dialogue, perhaps understanding. He didn't send it immediately. He paused, rereading the words. The act of writing it was enough for now. It was a recognition that even after betrayal, bridges could exist not out of naivety, but out of wisdom and self-respect. Standing in the living room, watching the city lights through the wide glass windows, Daniel felt a profound clarity. Revenge had been tempting, but he had realized its true nature. Satisfaction comes not from seeing another suffer, but from reclaiming one's life, asserting boundaries, and refusing to let others take what is yours without consequence. Marcus had left. The house was safe. Daniel had acted with precision, with calm, with justice. And in doing so, he had gained something far more valuable than temporary satisfaction. He had regained himself as Daniel moved through the rooms. He reflected on the lessons learned. Family could betray. Trust could be tested. Boundaries could be crossed. And yet, one could act with integrity. One could enforce justice. And one could emerge intact, not consumed by anger, not trapped by revenge, but strengthened by the experience. The house no longer felt just like property. It felt like a symbol of Daniel's choices, his resilience, his ability to act decisively without losing his humanity. He realized that the strongest victory is often quiet, understated, and deeply personal. It is not the humiliation of others, but the restoration of balance, dignity, and self-respect. And as the city lights twinkled, Daniel finally allowed himself to breathe. Marcus was gone. The house was his again. He had chosen justice over rage, precision over chaos, and in that choice, he had won something permanent: control over his life and clarity of mind. Revenge had not defined him. It had tested him. And in passing that test, Daniel Hale had discovered that true power lies not in anger, but in integrity.